Hey there, geeks and geekettes. This might take a while. I'm going to rank the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Oh yeah! So, before I start the list, there's only one film in the MCU that I don't like. There's nothing that I absolutely hate. It's just one film that I'm not sure of, and that's where we'll start. Number 23, The Incredible Hulk 2008. Ed Norton as Bruce Banner. It was a little... I don't know, it was just not my cup of tea. It wasn't the Hulk film I wanted. The original Hulk film with Ang Lee didn't do anything for me. I didn't like Ed Norton as Banner. I thought he was too whiny. Didn't like Liv Tyler. There was just not a lot about it. I did like Emil Blonsky and him then turning into Abomination. I like that they teased the leader, but then sadly it's not gone anywhere yet. Maybe it will, because apparently Marvel have got the rights back to make solo Hulk films. So, hey. Iron Man 2 is in 22nd place, made in 2010. It's not a bad film. It's just got weak villain. Whiplash, he was underused, and obviously Mickey Rourke is a good actor. Downey Jr. is on form. Obviously replacing Rhodey, I thought, for the better. And I did enjoy the movie. It just wasn't... It didn't have the magic of the first movie. There was just something missing, and can't quite put my finger on it, to be honest. But not a bad movie by any stretch. I still enjoy it, and I'll still watch it. So, 21. Thor: The Dark World 2013. This movie is nowhere near as bad as people make out. It gets a lot of stick, and people sort of always picture it as the worst of the Marvel movies. I don't think it is. It does have, again, a weak villain, which is kind of a theme with a lot of the earlier movies from Marvel. But it's got some great comedy, some brilliant action, and you know the stakes in the Thor movies are always quite high. You know, Thor deals with world-ending threats in all of his movies, potentially universe-ending threats at times. So, yeah, I've really enjoyed Thor: The Dark World, especially the bit with the portals, and I can't remember the character's name, but she can't say Mjolnir or Mil and calls it Mjolnir as it flies past. Funny moment in the film. At the 20th place, Avengers: Age of Ultron 2015. Great to see the original Avengers cast returning. There were great new cast additions in Wanda and Vision and the short-lived Quicksilver. I loved the villain. I loved Ultron. I think the voice work for Ultron was brilliant. He was really creepy and sinister sounding. I just really enjoyed the movie. The Hulk versus Hulkbuster scene, really good. The language cap joke that kept coming back, that, you know, that's sort of funny, enjoyable. Again, great stakes. Never felt quite... the stakes never felt quite as dangerous as the original Avengers movie. That movie sort of had a tension in the final act that this movie does lack a little, but then I still love this movie. 19. Thor 2011. Now, I've said it in numerous videos, Thor is my favourite Marvel character, always has been really, and in lesser hands of both the actor and director Kenneth Branagh and Chris Hemsworth, this film could have been a total cheese fest, and it could potentially have stopped the MCU dead if this film had failed, and it didn't. There's some really good comedy in it. There's a lot of entertainment in this movie. The casting is outstanding. I mean, Sir Anthony Hopkins, and just obviously Tom Hiddleston as Loki is absolutely perfect. He absolutely nails that role. Interesting fact for you, Tom Hiddleston was initially going to play Thor. I don't think that would have worked. He's too small. Obviously, Hemsworth's a big guy. So yeah, less capable hands. This could have been a cheesy crap film, to be honest, but it just looks beautiful. It's acted brilliantly. If I had to pick a negative aspect, it would be Hemsworth's eyebrows. I don't know what they did to it. He just looked odd for the entire movie with like these bleached blonde eyebrows. They shouldn't have done that, and thankfully they haven't done it again. Number 18 is quite a new movie. It's Captain Marvel 2019. Now, this was not the train wreck everyone was predicting. It was far from it. I think Brie Larson played the role really well. Interesting villains. Jude Law was good in it. I liked the setting in the 90s. I loved what they did with Nick Jackson. The de-aging in this was phenomenal. It didn't take you out of the movie, and there's certain movies where the de-aging thing doesn't look quite right. The first Captain America, where they've got him on the skinny body, it doesn't quite look real. But this is when, for me, they've nailed the de-aging technology. They did it with Robert Downey Jr. in Civil War, and that didn't quite look right either. But this movie, and for such a huge portion of the movie, is a de-aged Sam Jackson. Iron Man 3 in 2013. This was an action-packed, great-looking movie. They wasted the Mandarin, and initially I loved what they did with him because I proper laughed. I thought it was hilarious, and then I got quite angry that they'd sort of ruined such a great character in such a disposable way. Obviously, Hail to the King, the short story, Marvel short story, sort of rectifies that. And obviously, we know that the real Mandarin is coming back, or is coming in Shang-Chi. But yeah, still a great film. I love the comic that this was loosely based on, which was Iron Man Extremis, and I thought it was a really decent retelling of a story that I loved. It was one of my favourite Iron Man comics, and they did it well. Again, the villains, not the strongest point, but they're not the worst villains either. Next up is Captain America, the First Avenger from 2011. This movie had an awesome retro vibe to it. I loved the look of this movie, apart from the making Chris Evans look skinny. The digital effects they used, it didn't quite work for me, it didn't quite land. It did take me out of the movie a bit. First time I watched this was in 3D, and it was absolutely outstanding. I absolutely adored this movie. Again, another character that in less capable hands would have been really cheesy and could have stopped the MCU before it got started. Thankfully, a great solid cast that keep coming back, and an amazing story. Obviously, Bucky, the storyline with Bucky has haunted the Marvel universe going forward. This movie did a really good job of setting up the MCU. So next up is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which is 2017. Just such an amazing looking film. To me, Kurt Russell is standout in this movie. I think he's brilliant. I also think Dave Bautista as Drax is hilarious. Loved the cast, loved the story, loved the look. Almost as good as the first one. There was just, I don't know why this sequel wasn't quite as good as the first one. The first one caught me off guard because, being a Marvel fan, knew very little of the Guardians of the Galaxy, and that movie was just brilliant. And then, because of that first movie, I started reading Guardians of the Galaxy comics. So yeah, the villain, Ego the Living Planet, was great. I thought it was done cool, and there's some really funny moments in this movie. The comedy aspects of it, the sort of the wormhole travel, that I enjoyed it. I know some people didn't like that. I did. Next up is Ant-Man 2015. I wasn't excited for this movie. I liked Ant-Man. I like Ant-Man comics. I like Ant-Man as an Avenger. And when they cast Paul Rudd as Ant-Man, I wasn't sold on this movie at all. And this is one of the rare Marvel movies I didn't go to the cinema to watch. I had no interest in it. And then when I did see it, I instantly regretted not going to the cinema to watch it, because it was such a good movie. Really enjoyed it. Paul Rudd he's great as Ant-Man. He's as Scott Lang, he's perfect. Michael Douglas is perfect. I just really, really enjoyed the hell out of this film. And I'm gutted I didn't give it the time when it initially came out. Negatives, the villain again. It was almost a carbon copy of Ironmonger from the first Iron Man movie. So it does lose some points there. But again, I don't dislike any of these movies other than Incredible Hulk. And even that has some good elements to it. Okay, so next up is the sequel to Ant-Man. Ant-Man and the Wasp. Far more enjoyable than it had any right to be. Again, I wasn't... Yeah, as much as I enjoyed the first one, I wasn't particularly sold on this. But I learned from my mistakes. I went to the cinema to watch it. Mrs. Geek came with me, not being a Marvel fan, and enjoyed the hell out of it. She really enjoyed it. She didn't fall asleep through it like she did in Civil War. So, again, a great cast, and the smaller scale of the Ant-Man movies, where it's not world-ending stuff. It's almost like a palate cleansing of all of these massive movies, and I really enjoy the street level sort of Ant-Man world. Really enjoyed it. And who knew he'd have such an important role in upcoming Avengers movies? It's quite shocking that such a unknown character, if you don't read Marvel comics, had such a big part and such a good movie. Next up is Doctor Strange in 2016. Brilliant film. For a long time, this was top of my list of Marvel movies. I really enjoyed this movie. I loved the look of it. I loved the feel of it. Benedict Cumberbatch was a really good casting as Doctor Strange, or Benedict Cumberbatch. Just a really enjoyable movie. I liked Caecilius, the villain. I loved the guy that plays him. He was brilliant as Hannibal in the TV series. The special effects in this movie are out of this world. See what I did there? It explores the multiverse, and it didn't follow the tropes of a normal origin story. And despite being a modern telling, it was quite faithful to the source material. Mostly, obviously, the ancient one was changed a little bit. I really enjoyed Doctor Strange. Just greatly entertaining, hugely enjoyable, and it is a love letter to the comics that this movie is based on, which is it's nice to see. So 2017, Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, I really enjoyed this movie. I really enjoyed seeing Spider-Man in his own sort of movie. I think it does rely too heavily on Iron Man and the MCU, but we never thought this would happen, where Iron Man and Spider-Man would share a screen. So, obviously it happened before in Civil War, but it could have been a one-off. And yeah, really enjoyed the movie. He's definitely my favourite actor that's played Spider-Man. I'm not a fan of Maguire. I was a fan of Garfield, who played the other Spider-Man in the second reboot. I think he was a good Spider-Man, not a very good Peter Parker. He was a little bit too cool. Peter Parker's a geek, and he wasn't a geek in those movies. But this film, they nailed the character of Peter Parker. I think that the Tom Holland has nailed the part. The fact that he's acrobatic as well, and it's him in the suit, unlike the original Spider-Man, where every time the guy put the suit on, he grew. So yeah, loved Homecoming. So speaking of Spider-Man, Captain America Civil War from 2016 is my next film on the list. Initially, I loved this film. I thought it was outstanding. I thought the stakes were great. The reason for the battle was great. And obviously the Winter Soldier storyline that's sort of haunted the trilogy of Captain America films and gone into the Avengers movies. Just brilliant. The way they played it all off, that it really landed for me. Loved the character of the Winter Soldier and Bucky. Loved how that was one of the factors that drew the wedge between the Avengers. And it felt bigger than a Captain America film. It felt like an Avengers level film, and just really good. And Paul Rudd steals the scenes he's in, and then Spider-Man steals the scenes he's in. Downey Jr. is on form. Just a really, really good movie. Again, another one that was top of my list at one point. So on to my next, Spider-Man Far From Home. I enjoyed this movie, obviously last year, 2019. I enjoyed this far more than the previous Spider-Man movie. I enjoyed it a lot more than any of the other Spider-Man movies. I think Tom Holland has settled into the role of Spider-Man really well at this point. I loved Jake Gyllenhaal as Quentin Beck or Mysterio. I like the twist they did on the character. I hope they haven't really killed him off. I do think it would be a shame to waste him. I think they could do more with Mysterio. Maybe he's faked his death or something. I hope so. I liked the Skrull element in it. I liked Nick Fury, his involvement, the side characters. Nobody seemed wasted in this film. MJ took a bit of a backseat, which I think was a good thing, because it allowed the story to flow better. That she was in a sense of danger, but she's not a damsel in distress. So just a really, really good Spider-Man movie. On to the next, Guardians of the Galaxy from 2014. I went into the cinema not knowing what the hell to expect from this movie, because I knew very little about the Guardians of the Galaxy. I knew who Rocket Raccoon was. I knew who Groot was. The others, I didn't really know that much about. And I was so entertained by this movie. It was proper laugh out loud funny. The special effects were great. The casting was spot on. Dave Bautista, his comedic timing is great. Chris Pratt plays Star-Lord. I mean, the shape he got into to play Star-Lord. And then he actually brings a lot of emotion to the role that I wasn't expecting, because of his tragic sort of backstory, which bleeds into the second movie and into Infinity War. Just, this film surprised the hell out of everyone, I think. It was such an enjoyable sci-fi fantasy space romp. And this is where Marvel do so well, because they cover in all these different genres within the MCU based on comic books. On to the next, Avengers 2012, a film I never ever thought would be made. I didn't think it would happen. I didn't think the MCU was ever going to last, to be honest. I didn't think that comic book sales were down. They weren't as high as they could have been, and there was a bit of comic book fatigue about for a while as well. And this movie just reinvigorated everything. DC have tried to clone this and failed spectacularly with the DC Extended Universe. The comedy in this, the way the cast play off each other, all six of them, they're great together. Downey Jr., the sort of born leader of the cast, and Iron Man being the leader of the Avengers in this movie is just really, really enjoyable. Obviously, Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk, he steals just about every scene he's in. I think he's a brilliant Hulk, and I think he's a brilliant Bruce Banner. I hope they do a solo movie with him. The closest we've got is Thor Ragnarok. Hulk was sort of heavily involved in that movie, and I'd like to see Ruffalo get his own Hulk movie made. Apparently it's going to happen because Marvel now own it, as I said earlier. Okay, so next up is Black Panther 2018. For me, the most overhyped of the MCU movies. Now, I'm not saying I don't like the movie. I love the movie. It's a really, really good movie. I think Chadwick Boseman is a great Black Panther T'Challa. The story was good. The effects were good. The villain, Killmonger, great. Loved it. But everyone was raving this is the best comic book movie ever made, and you need to chill the fuck out, because it wasn't. Sorry. I think the special effects are lacking in certain places, especially the fight between Black Panther and Killmonger in the sort of underground place. It looked like rubber bands fighting. I didn't like that. The acting was superb. The movie itself was great and enjoyable. Most of the special effects were good, but at the same point, this film was completely blown out of proportion for me. I'm not saying I hate it by any stretch. It's really high up on my list. It's just not as great as everyone made it out to be. And I did feel a little disappointed walking out the cinema from this, that it wasn't what everyone had said. But it's my list, so if you don't like my opinion, then leave an angry comment. I'll ignore it. This part of my list was the hardest part to do, was to get the sort of top five. Top five was really hard to do. So, in 5th place, Avengers Infinity War. This was second when I started this list, and it's just dropped down. I loved Infinity War. I loved the stakes of it. That gut punch ending. It looks great. It felt great. And it was, at the time, it was the best comic book movie I'd ever seen. It was so spectacular, so big, that just an incredible action movie, an incredible comic book movie. And it only moved down the list initially because of the sequel. But then there's other films that I just enjoy a little bit more. I got some friends that said this film was rushed. I was like, how could it have been rushed? It took 10 years to get to this point. That's not rushing. The DCU, that was rushing. The stakes in this movie were massive. I mean, half of the universe being wiped out. And despite the fact that Thanos is a bit of a dick, you kind of understand where he's coming from. I'm not saying you root for him, but you definitely understand where Thanos is coming from. There's logic to his evilness. He's not just evil for the sake of evil, which I thought was really good and just really well made. And obviously, this was a next level after the other Avengers movies and Civil War, etc. The cast in this was massive, and I generally wondered if they could ever top it, and thankfully they did. So next up is Iron Man from 2008, the movie that started it all. Robert Downey Jr. is Iron Man. He is Tony Stark. He utterly smashed this role. If Tom Cruise had been cast as originally they were planning, I probably wouldn't have even watched the movie, because I can't stand Tom Cruise. I don't enjoy anything he does other than when he played Lestat, and that wore thin on the second watch. Downey was perfect. The effects were brilliant. The story was brilliant. Now, I was an Iron Man fan before this movie. I was an Iron Man fan as a kid because of the cartoon, and I used to read comics as a kid. My dad used to get me comics, and Iron Man to me was never a B-list superhero. He was up there with Spider-Man and Thor for me. So, and to see this done so well, and for it to be embraced universally and be such a smash hit. And it started all of this MCU. I mean, all of this stuff wouldn't exist if this film had failed. Half my Funko Pops wouldn't exist if this movie had failed. This movie was the start of a pop culture phenomenon, and it cannot be underrated. Which is a lot of positives to give something that's in 4th place. But I do enjoy these other movies more. But Iron Man's got a special place, I think, for any fan of comic book movies. In 3rd place, Captain America: Winter Soldier. Just what a great movie. This was not like any other comic book movie. It was almost like a spy thriller that happened to feature superheroes. Now, I knew who the Winter Soldier was, obviously, long before they announced it, because I'd read the comics. I knew exactly who Bucky and the Winter Soldier, etc. I knew the storyline that they were going to follow or loosely base this on, and it was outstanding. The Winter Soldier felt like a dangerous villain. He wasn't your typical carbon clone of the hero of the movie. He was dark, he was mysterious, even though you knew who he was, or most people had worked it out quite early on. He had a danger and a sort of a darkness to him. Obviously, Natasha Romanoff's character grew in this movie as well. The introduction of Falcon, who's really underutilised in the MCU at the moment. Obviously, he's getting his own show with the Winter Soldier. I still think Winter Soldier should have got Cap Shield, but that's just me. But yeah, really, really enjoyed this movie. The sort of the Hail Hydra that had ramifications all across the MCU. Just a really, really good movie. And even a really good standalone movie. You could just watch this movie as a spy thriller setting, maybe a little bit off in the future, and it holds up. It's a really, really good movie. Obviously, you wouldn't get who the Winter Soldier is without watching the first Captain America, but I really, really enjoyed this movie. Number 2 is thankfully one of my favourite comic book characters, and it's Thor Ragnarok. Now, I loved the other Thor movies, even the ones people didn't like, I did like. I like the character. I love what Hemsworth does with it. I think he's a scene stealer. I think he's perfect as Thor. This movie, Taika Waititi, he saw all the weaknesses of the first 2 movies, got rid of them, injected the comedy, the comic book silliness, embraced that, and made an outstanding movie. I mean, this thing is so funny, yet very tragic. I mean, a lot of people think of Thor Ragnarok and they're like, oh, it's really funny. I think how tragic that movie is for the lead character. He loses everything in this movie. He loses his eye. He loses his father. His sister breaks his hammer and then takes his eye. It's just outstanding. Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk excels in this movie. The fight in the gladiator pit between the two was brilliant. It's a friend from work line that apparently a kid gave to Hemsworth. Just a really fun movie, and obviously there's the Get Help stands out. The dynamic with Loki and Thor, Hulk and Loki. It's just, I really, really enjoyed this film, and obviously it was only ever going to be beaten by one other movie. That is Avengers Endgame from 2019. Avengers Endgame isn't just my favourite Marvel movie, it's my favourite comic book movie, and it's up there with the likes of Pulp Fiction and Empire Strikes Back. I genuinely think this film was very, very moving in places. Beginning, middle and end. The stakes were so high in it. There was parts of this movie where the audience would collectively hold their breath. And when Cap lifted Mjolnir, whatever, when he lifted that, you could the smiles on people in the cinema, the cheers that were let out. I nearly got out of my seat and fuck yeah as loud as I could. It was such a brilliant movie moment, not just for Marvel. It was one of the only times I've seen that reaction in a cinema, and I really enjoyed it. And me and Funko Pop Tart, I'll leave a picture or a link somewhere for him, we're discussing this the other day. It was like a cultural phenomenon. Was that the lifting or the holding of Thor's hammer by Captain America? The fight scenes in this film were brilliant. The fact that Ant-Man almost carried the film for a while. The clever Hulk, or the Professor Hulk. The time travel. Now, I know that people have issues with the time travel in this movie, and that it doesn't make sense, or it doesn't this, that, the other. I'm quite happy to go and take my brain out of gear and just enjoy the movie for what it is, and I thought it was great. And obviously this was full circle for 2 of the original Avengers. Captain America and Iron Man will never be the same again. The MCU will never be the same again because of the ending of this film. And if you haven't seen it, why are you watching this list? I've watched this movie 3 or 4 times already, and each time the ending of this movie still sort of gets to me. It does choke me up a little bit. The end of this movie in the cinema, they were grown men with tears streaming down their face, which is a sign of a well-written, good movie. Just what a way to have beat the movie that came before it. It just smashed Infinity War, and I didn't think they'd do it. I thought this film could have been a letdown. And then, obviously, one of the highlights of this movie for me personally was Thor. having a fat comic book hero because he was depressed, PTSD'd. It just worked for me. I thought he was hysterical. I thought he was moving. It was sad because the guy has lost more than anyone in the MCU. He's had the hardest time of it, and to see it have that effect on him. And then I read somewhere that Chris Hemsworth, at the end when he gets powered up and he's got Stormbreaker and Mjolnir, and he goes up against Thanos, they were going to take the fat suit off him, and he was like, no, people don't get over that sort of stuff. I'm staying fat. So obviously they braided his beard and stuff, give him his sort of dreadlocks and his armour over the fat suit. The guy must be boiling in it. It's just an outstanding movie, to be honest. Avengers Endgame, one of my favourite movies of all time. Mrs. Geek loved the hell out of it. I don't know anyone that didn't enjoy it, I don't think. And obviously it influenced my buying of toys for the last 2 years. I think it was about a year to build up that MCU collection. Moved away from all the DC stuff I was collecting and moved on to the MCU figures, because the MCU was such a ride. I absolutely loved it. Guys, Hulk smash the subscribe button, Hulk smash the like button, get involved in the conversation, leave your own list, rank your 23 movies from the Marvel Cinematic Universe in your order, because everyone's going to have different opinions on this, and I will read and respond to all the opinions in the comments down below. I've been the Bearded Geek. This is going to take me ages to edit. I'll see you guys soon for another review or unboxing. Definitely going to be doing more in the way of movies now. I'm going to be doing more movie reviews, mostly comic book movies. Definitely a lot of horror movies, because I do love horror, although I haven't seen a good horror movie yet this year. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Goodbye.